This is the Advaita After Hours podcast, where we explore how spirituality influences our daily lives. Hari Om, I am Rajesh, and today Narayanan and I explore the concept of bhakti, its significance in personal spirituality, and how it can be integrated into daily life. We discuss the various paths to understanding God, including jnana, karma, and bhakti, and the importance of cultivating a personal relationship with the divine. We discuss vexing questions, such as where does and where should bhakti fit into our daily life priorities and spiritual priorities. During our regular day, how do we remember and find God? How do we reconcile that God is within us, but also worship and love our Ishta Devatas? And finally, how do we cultivate raw love for God and understand His miracles? So sit back, listen, and reflect as you join us on this journey. Okay. All right. Good evening, Naranji.
Good evening, Rajeshi. Good to see you.
So today's topic to discuss is going to be bhakti and how we can kind of apply bhakti in our lives. And is bhakti even a necessary ingredient, or can you kind of make do without it? Was sort of the topic for today. So maybe we can start there. And do you want to just introduce to you what bhakti means, and then
Yes.
maybe we can talk a little bit about the pancha bhavas and how one may express bhakti in different ways?
Yeah. So, from a personal point of view, bhakti is something that nobody teaches you. You see how the way in which you grow up in your household and people do, or at least think of bhakti in that household, how they do it, and that kind of diffuses to you, right? That's kind of how I've gotten used to it. There was no formal, this is how bhakti has to be. I mean, you light a lamp twice a day. I see all the elders praying, and you also go and do it because it becomes a habit, right? That's how bhakti became for me. It was nothing really organized, regimental in any way, form, or fashion. But as you age and as you start to learn and see other things, and you think that what, this was optional, and you can still make it optional as an action item. But if that is how you have been introduced to it, have grown up with it, without you knowing, it's part of you. That's how I think of it now. Not considering the strictest definitions of what bhakti is and all of that. It's part of what you do every day, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly.
Yeah. And, I mean, similar to you, I also grew up in quite an orthodox setting where I think my idea of bhakti was various rituals that are done, and rituals that are done um, with an underlying belief behind it, right? So not asking, okay, why are you doing this particular step, but believing that this is for a greater purpose. But to me, I think the time when I really started to question how does bhava or bhakti illustrate itself was actually when I came to college in the United States. Because the one thing that I had not been exposed to before is among a lot of Christian belief systems, some really um, lean into the idea of that personal relationship with God, meaning that I think, and again, this is a little bit out of my exact scope, but when you think of Catholicism, I think of it about it as still a little bit more a distance relationship that kind of the follower has to God. But then there are some other branches within Christianity, particularly Protestant branches, where I would talk to my friends in college and they would talk about this very personal relationship to God. God was their best friend. They would confide in them, they would curse at them, they would blame them. And to me, that was in some ways a very foreign concept. So that made me really think about in Hinduism, is there a tradition of fostering a personal relationship with God? And it really kind of put me down that path of thought process behind bhakti.
Yeah. And lots of Western religions have that, like you said, this personal relationship with God, and in Christianity, it's typically, because there's only one God, right? And it's much easier to say that's the God you go to. Whereas in Hinduism, what you end up is doing, 33 crores, and lots of people end up getting confused and not even going to any god at all. But the idea that you said, do we have that personal relationship with God? We are, in terms of temples, right? So we have this organized ways of, at least to start off, going to temples, and that is where we all learned, that's where God resides, at least to start with your basic idea of what that is. You go there and you say there is God, but you go for several different reasons. You don't only always go for that personal connection or bhakti to God. You go for several reasons, and the hope is that, having gone enough number of times, there is some diffusion of it, and you kind of get it. But all religions, and at the end of the day, you need, for bhakti also, you need self effort. You don't, you have to understand why you're doing it, and then this refines and gives you perspectives as to why you're doing it and what it is. Otherwise, we are all like, leaves floating out in the air, don't know what it is. 15 people went, I also went behind them, I don't know why it is. But once you start to understand it, that understanding takes some effort in figuring out what that is. I think that crystallizes and probably makes all of our experiences more vivid with respect to what.
Yeah. The other thing that I reflect a lot upon is where does bhakti fit in the priority list, right? I think, you know, um, I can speak for us, but I think anybody that happens to listen to this, they're starting to ask that question already, right? Like, who am I? Where do I fit in the world? What is the bigger purpose? Am I a part of something larger? And so, if you're kind of on that journey, um, whether it's purely recreational or something you're invested more in, I think the one thing I always think about is where does bhakti fit in that journey? Because if you think about it, there's so many things that one can do to move on that journey, right? There is obviously study and kind of that path of jnana. There's a lot of ritual and karmas that one can do. And in Hinduism, it's very easy to have that be a full-time job, right? Just wake up, there's a puja for the morning, there's a puja for the afternoon, there's a puja before eating, there's a puja after eating. You can
Yeah.
totally go down that path in your own life, and I'm sure this has changed over time, how have you incorporated bhakti and where do you think about it on this sort of very rudimentary to-do list of understanding yourself better?
Okay, so this occurred much later, right? You, like you said, the priority list bhakti, when you are young, when did bhakti come? To be frank, and that's what most of us do, and that's what I think how it is, right? When you are in some kind of a struggle, you need an anchor. You need to find out, you are in trouble. You need to hang on to something. You don't have anybody else that you can share this with. Oh my God, I'll call God at that point. So your bhakti was kind of a very opportunistic bhakti, where you go to God when you're in trouble. So that's the whole idea, right? So my mother always used to say, you know what, if you see a lot of people coming to temple at a certain point of time for
There's an exam around
festivals,
the corner.
you know, yeah. You see that exam season, Guruvayur temple, for example, exam season, plenty of crowd. So my mother always used to say that this is exam, pleasing God at this point of time, because he's all very busy with trying to find out who should pass what exam. I mean, that's what we also did, right? Before the exam, go to the temple, and then, be very careful about what you ask for. So, that idea of, and then you get it sometimes, right? Sometimes you get it. Um, you feel that, okay, there's a God who is hearing what I'm asking for, and therefore that trust comes in and that goes forward. Sometimes you don't get it and you become a non-believer and say, what's the use of a God who can't even do these little things for me? But so, well, that's how personally it evolved. But after some time, you understand that, and if you go through a little bit of self effort learning some of these things, you understand that this is the undercurrent that pins everything else, right? You need, and bhakti not as a seeking something, not as asking. So, what good? I mean, if you go and ask God, for example, for you, you're a doctor, you need patients, you need people that you should operate on. But if the God grants everybody that nobody should, everybody goes with cancer, God says, okay, I'll cure it. What will you do, right? So I think our karmas have to play out in some way, and God can't be giving everything that everybody asks for, because then he has to be biased at some point of time. You understand that principle. Once you understand that principle, that it's not about giving and taking with God. This is not a transactional relationship. I think things can change much more for the better.
The I'll tell you one thing that I fundamentally have always had a bit of a problem grasping, in that sometimes I think in Vedanta we try to tell people, just choose a path. There's karma path, there's jnana path, there's bhakti path, and just choose one and go. And it was a lecture by Swami Paramarthananda many years ago at this point, which kind of made that artificial trifurcation less artificial. In that, I think he did a great job of explaining it, but it wasn't until recently that I think I started to get the gist of what he's trying to say, which is that these paths aren't mutually exclusive, but they require one another, right? Meaning that, okay, if we go back into the Vedas, for example, right, Max Mueller is probably one of the seminal people, right? German guy, I believe, who came and became a Sanskrit scholar, translated a lot of the early Vedas, but by no means would anyone call him a Maharishi, right? Meaning that even though he had a grasp of Sanskrit grammar and was able to transliterate it, no one would confuse him with someone that understood the scriptures. Okay, that's one. And then you take someone like Ramana Maharishi, right? Someone that actually never claimed to be a scriptural scholar, right? But just through self inquiry and meditation, he, quote unquote, came to the truth. Meaning there's this idea that jnana alone can get you there, bhakti alone can get you there, karma alone can get you there. But I start to feel now, especially, that even though you may start off being oriented towards more of a dogmatic study of the scriptures, unless that is backed up um, by a practiced belief. And what I mean by practiced belief is it's not enough just to believe that they're real, but that you work to try and recognize the realness. Or if you're someone that just believes and is doing the karmas, I think that's great. But at some point, you have to back that up by also trying to understand the reason why you're doing it. Meaning that I think all these paths have to converge at some point. But the thing I struggle with is, we kind of accept that we all have different gunas and vasanas, right? So what is your feeling? Do you feel that if there's a third person that you have to advise, and they're trying to figure out what is my quote unquote path, right? How would you advise them, thinking about it in that framework of, there's jnana or scriptural study, there's bhakti, which is, I think, more than faith, let's just call it practiced faith, right? Where you put that effort in every day. Or there's karma, where you're not just trying to do the right thing, but you're trying to think about the right thing and trying to detach yourself and do the right thing for the sake of the right thing itself.
Yeah. I think you made this point very clear, right? There are three parts, and you heard from Swamiji that there is a union of those, and there is one is not independent of the other, right? And I think that is what it is, because if there's only one path, Krishna could have used that time very efficiently and told Arjuna that exact one path and do it. Why did he take all this time to give him three paths and then tell him, you know what, now I've told you everything, you do as you like? I mean, it sounds like you've taken all this time to do it and then given him this big choice as to figure it out. That's typically the way of trusting the student to do the right thing. But I look at bhakti as a purifying effort. If you want to, so you do karma, right? You do lots of karma, and if I do karma, if I don't have to have that doership and enjoyership in the karma that you eventually want to be detached, I need to offer this to somebody. Who will I offer it to? I need somebody who is bigger and better than me to offer my karma to, right? And I need somebody who I love to offer my karma to, whether knowingly or unknowingly. And that has to be the God, and that is bhakti. That is karma bhakti. Simply, you do it, whether it is seva to the community, seva to other people, you offer it as a seva to a bigger goal, to God, like Yajna Baba, like Bhagavad Gita says. And whatever comes up, you take at prasada, prasada bhakti. So in terms of karma, that is good. Jnana, because if you don't do that, you have kartritra bhoktra power. The problem with jnana is, if you think you know, ego will rear its head and say, oh my God, I can do this 15 verses just like that, and I know all of those. Scripturally, I've become now. So then my ego is coming up, and all the effort is wasted, right? Because you're becoming your vasanas are being built up just for doing it again. You're not purified. So bhakti, even that offering as your knowledge, I take it from you, tera tujhko arpan karta, kya lage mera, works very well because it's a good giving it back. I took it, I played out. So I did whatever calculations I had to do. I gave it back to you. You take yours. That way, you can go back and sleep well, saying that whatever I did, I had to do well. Results, yeah, I may get some, I may not get some, but I have one place to give it all back at the end of the day. And bhakti alone can do.
In your mind, how do you reconcile kind of the kind of Advaita tenet that there is no third person God that's different from you? There is no Vaikunta, truthfully, where Vishnu resides. Um, we are all God. There isn't anyone separate. There's no one to pray to other than praying to the recognition of the wonder in yourself. And with this personal relationship, this kind of prasadam, asking, receiving uh, terminology, how do you reconcile those two?
So I think again, I'm not an Advaita scholar to go deep and explain this, and I don't understand this. But I don't think Advaita really tells
But
you
in your
that.
life, how does that? How do you do it in your life though? Because I know you. I mean, you have both a very deep proclivity for um, the philosophy behind it, but you also try to practice bhakti, right? So forget what the scriptures say. How do you, in your own mind, on a day to day basis, reconcile what initially seems like a paradox?
Yeah. So if you are realized, that is when you and God are one. Once you're not there, Dvaita is completely through and through, right? The Advaita is that North Star that's there, but haven't gotten there and haven't experienced it. It is only the duality that I can see. I go to the temple, I see God differently, even though I try to convince myself that all that I'm learning is telling that Chaitanya and whatever is keeping me alive and making me all do is the same. But do I have an experience of it? No, I don't have an experience of it. And until I have an experience of it, and of course, Advaita will say that, it is right here, right now. It is just that you are that, you just don't know it, right? It's just that you don't know it. Once you know it, like Ramana Maharshi says, who is asking this question? When every question you ask, if you ask who is asking this question, no question will exist. But that is such a high ceiling to get to in day-to-day transactional life. You need an anchor. You need, when you are struggling through life, you need an anchor. And God, it's where you see that 9 forms of bhakti that they say, right? Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, all of that. When all of those we do that, there is no special examples. Oh, Hanuman is a Dasa, Arjuna is a Sakya. You can't say that you are all of that, because there are times where you relate to God so close. There are times to where that God is so far, and I'm trying to stretch to get there. So in our lives, I think we do the struggles. We have our struggles, but that's the beauty of it, right? That struggle is the beauty of it. And Advaita is that when you get it, you have it. Until then, you have it. But this is like money in the bank that has been frozen, right? The FBI has frozen my account or whatever, but I say that I have money in the bank, but I can't use it. That's Advaita, and I have to get that. I have to release that and get it.
We were both really fortunate to host Swami Ishrananda recently at our Chinmay mission in Phoenix, and he gave this really great set of selected verses interpretation of the Shivananda Lahari. But he really emphasized this idea of bhakti and starting to see um, God everywhere around you, but not just in an abstract concept, but in a very relatable personal concept. And he said something that's really stuck with me, which is, we do have a pantheon of gods, and we kind of ascribe different powers to them, different purposes to them. But one thing he said that really stuck to me was this idea of, find the God that really speaks to you and make that your personal friend, right? Your personal God. It doesn't mean you can't have others, but find that one. And then try to see him or her everywhere that you look. And recently, we had gone on this vacation to Belize. And I remember we were on this speedboat and we were driving out on the ocean to this one island. And, the wind was blowing in our faces. And I think that was one moment where I was able to grasp what he said. In that moment, looking at not just the vastness, but the beauty, but also the human ingenuity that allowed us to access this beauty. It really made me be able to look at it and kind of just say, like, Mahadeva, thank you for this. Sairam, thank you for this. Thank you for, um, creating this beauty that I'm able to express. Thank you for allowing me to experience it. And then to me, I think where that Advaita connection came in was that next sentence that went through my head, which is, thank you for allowing me to realize that I am also just a part of your design, that I am no different from this horizon that seems to not end. I'm no different from this manatee in the water whose closest relative is an elephant, which is crazy to imagine. Thank you for this boat that's a part of me, the people that built the boat that are a part of me. And in some ways, that is how I felt very connected for this paradox in sort of being able to appreciate the grandeur, but also appreciate that I am a part of that grandeur. And maybe that final realization link comes um, when that distinction doesn't even exist anymore, right? It becomes an automatic rather than a conception.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you just said is the last paragraph of what I wrote in my last story, right? That's exactly what it is. It is that oneness that you kind of feel, um, and it's there. You are not able to feel it all the time, but like you said, instances like that show that there is really no difference between what I think, and all this duplicity is nothing but names and forms of one grand whatever that is. For lack of better word, we call God or Brahman or whatever, right? So it really, and whether it's Mahadeva or Krishna or Devi or Ganesha, whatever that is, those are all names and forms that we, for our convenience and the way that we relate to keep that connection. And if you look at that, it's very easy. I don't know if I told you this thing that I heard from Swami Sarvapriyananda. So when he was passing through Lucknow airport in the middle of the night, the security guy stopped him and said, Swamiji, you do pravajans, right? Tell us something, because there was nobody there. So and Swamiji said, what do you want to know? They asked him, oh, you do all of those. How do you see God in everything? Exactly like you asked, right? So he said, so who is your Ishta Devata? He said, Hanuman. So he said, okay, when every guy comes and stands in front of you and you do your screening of that person, in your mind, put one flower to the Hanuman altar and said, Hanumanji, I have seen one more of you. Hanumanji, I've seen one more of you. Do that. Dinbar, you can do puja because you're doing this all the time. Everybody who walks in front of you is Hanuman.
And I think that's a beautiful story about, I think we're in 2025, so everything is about life hacks, right? Like, if it doesn't have a life hack, it's not been
Yeah,
studied
yeah.
or thought about. Um, but there's a interesting concept. There's I'm sure you're familiar with this Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, right? He's
Uh-huh.
the founder, or kind of at least the one that popularized the idea of mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Many years ago, this must have been about 10 or 12 years ago, I'd gone to a retreat of his, and they talked a little bit about what they do at Plum Village, right? That's kind of like their big retreat. And the fact that at random periods in the day, it's not scheduled, but they have random periods in the day when someone will hit a gong. And when that happens, everybody stops what they're doing and uses that as a moment to reflect and come back to the present. And one thing that they talked about at this retreat is trying to find those signals in your day-to-day life that are reminders to do that. So one thing they brought up is, if you're driving, anytime you're at a red light, that is a signal for you to just stop and come back to the present and do that. And so I think when you tell the story about Sarvapriyananda saying, each person that comes through, imagine they're Hanuman, right? Imagine that each person you're wanding is Hanuman. I think about ways in which we can also apply that into our life. So we have more of these moments where we stop, try to get over this not duality, but try to get over what's the word I'm looking for? This idea of differenceness between each other, and try to identify that oneness. And sometimes it's hard because your mind is so preoccupied with differenceness.
Correct.
But how do you, I mean, have you had any strategies, or do you employ any hacks that you can share?
No, I don't think there is any hack, but let me think what I tried. So one of the things that I used to do, and I think like you said, that connection and that being in the present and constantly thinking about God. Um, so I deal with so many people. I see so many people a day, as students, as people coming in, walking through my office, all of those different things, right? At some point of time, so this is not direct answer to a question, but kind of an experiential thing. So, and we have to judge people all the time, right? A student is a good student, a student is a not very good student, the student doesn't understand stuff. But after listening to all these Vedanta lectures, going through so many of those, I had a question as to what is my justification to say good, bad, best, better, all of that, right? You're all one. So I kind of made a mental decision at one point of time to say that I will not judge any student. It's a very, very slight change of attitude, which I tell my high schoolers also now, that you don't, everybody is the same. Everybody is inherently that one, inherently great. It is just that the student has a little problem with this topic, just that the student doesn't seem to understand a certain thing. So nothing wrong with him. His grasp of something is good. So rather than saying some, so I still correct my colleagues also when they say he's a bad student. I said there are really no bad students. There are only students. And then because if you say everything is student, everybody is student, then you kind of are getting to that oneness, right? Everybody is the same.
Yeah.
And then the differences that you see are in their actions. So I tell my 12th graders all the time, you don't dislike anybody. You dislike their actions. You don't dislike a person ever. All you dislike are their actions, and its actions could be speech. Actions could be their thoughts. Action could be what they do. But you dislike that, and you have right to to tell them that you disagree with them, but never to dislike.
Yeah. No, I think that's beautiful. It's very interesting in medicine, which is kind of my domain. There's this raging debate on propriety, on like how to speak properly, right? And one thing I think there's a big push against is not confusing the disease and the person. Meaning, they say this is Narayanan, he's a diabetic. He's not a diabetic. He's a person that has diabetes. This is a person that's a hypertensive. He's not. He's a person that has it, right? I think so. Remembering, I think in some ways the person inside is, I think, a commonality there. The going back to Swami Ishrananda's visit, um, there's one story he said again that really resonated with me, and it's a story that I'd heard before, right? It's about uh, Kanea, right? The guy that the hunter, and I encourage people to look it up. But it's essentially the story about this hunter that wasn't familiar with the ways and customs of Hindu practice, and so he found this Swayambhu, or this god rock in the forest, and he decided to love it in the way that he knew how to love it, which meant putting meat in front of it, using his own spit to clean it, even putting his foot on the idol when he was doing the ultimate sacrifice of offering his eyes. And all this was to the horror of a pundit that was watching. And when I heard that story, the thing that I was moved by is that in some ways I feel like I am that pundit, right? I am that person that has been um, taught that there's a way to love God, there's a way to honor God, and that is the way to do it. And the reason I think that story resonated with me so much is that sometimes when we try to love God in a framework that's given to us, somewhere the rawness, that intensity of the love gets lost. And that is something that I am struggling to find is how do you find that raw love for God? And there's such beautiful stories of children doing it, right? I mean, Andal and
Yes.
her love is legendary. But, as a grown adult who has, and I say this very carefully, who has the burden of knowledge, how do you find that raw, unadulterated love?
It is, I think, I mean, we all have, I mean, if you closely look through, and I think all of us will have it at different, with varying degrees. I'm sure you've had times where you cried out of love, right? Times where you were praying and you cried. I've had several instances of those, and what I have noticed is that you need two things for that. You need unconditional love. You don't expect anything. You don't ask for anything, and I think that is something that is cultivatable. Not asking God for anything is definitely a cultivatable trait. Even though I for sure grew up going to temples, doing a puja for a specific purpose that will give me something specific. If I need something else, I have to do a different puja for that, right? Because that puja was only for that thing. This is like going to a grocery store,
Yeah.
picking up the right thing. But you get away from that idea of I am not giving, I am not giving in the sense giving material stuff. All I have to give is my love, and I want the presence. If you go to the temple, simply say, I'm going for the presence of God. So once you have that unconditionality built in, I think some of the rawness that you are saying, I think will come with time. Again, none of those are going to come without purity. I think we are all dumped with so many vasanas, so many layers that we have to clean and purify. I think we are pure only when we are in deep sleep. But we have to clear off so many layers. But all of these are cleansing actions, and once that consciously comes in, I think this will happen. But like
And
Bhagavan Krishna said, Bahunam Janmanam Ande Jnanavan Mam Prabhati. It'll take several janmas. But you make sincere, honest effort.
the one thing I reflect upon also culturally, right? I think our Hindu heritage is unique in that when you look at our arts, there's almost no people associated with our arts. Like if I asked you, name 5 famous Hindu artists or sculptors or dancers or music composers, I think is a little bit different. But if you name them, many times I think they're nameless because I think historically they saw these endeavors as ways to find union with God. And I think prayer is a really powerful way to find union with God, but I don't think it's the only way. Meditation is a powerful way to find union with God. It's not the only way. I think in some ways, our popular understandings of entertainment has somewhat diluted entertainment's value in finding union with God too. I think music, bhajans, dance, something even as simple as a mindful walk. I think there's so many ways to find union with God that one thing that I want to focus on as this kind of next year unravels is just as I'm trying to have a more personal relationship with my Ishta Devata, so um, explore other avenues of finding union with God to see what sticks, right? Because maybe the way in which I found union when I was 20 and 25 is different when I'm 40 and 45, and will be probably different when I'm 60 and 65. But this comes back to your earlier point where it's not something that hits you over the head like a hammer, but I think it's something that you have to work towards to find that union, to find that moment when you get that inner clarity.
Yeah. So let me give you some examples in that. I mean, I think when people say that God tests you, I think there is certain element of truth in it. I mean, this could be purely coincidental, and if a rational, logical person would say that what, this is statistical, that's how exactly how it happened. But couple of times I've had this, right? I go to a temple where with which is far away, go with a group of people that I know. It's far away. You have to stand in a queue for a long period of time. You have to wake up early in the morning to do that, and you do all of that, and you go and see, and I go away, and you go away, you do all of that, and you go buy prasadam or whatever. The one guy who comes with me just stays there, hangs there around near that. And for no reason, he is called by some temple guy and says, "You want to come and sit here and pray." So I think, oh, if I had stayed there, I would have got chance. But hey, God didn't want me to do that at that time. And I've had this happen to me couple of times, and you question, I mean, are you not? So, but then I think, then there's always, you can go into literature, and you always find, God tests people that He likes. So maybe He's just testing me. It's okay. I'll take. But I've had these experiences where you really want, and all I saw was a glimpse, and I wanted to see more. I want to spend more time in front of the altar. It's so crowded, you just can't do it. But just because the other guy happened to hang out there and was so lazy to go and get the prasadam, and gave me his container also to get the prasadam, and I went like a poor servant to get the prasadam, he stood there. He was asked to come once more and stand in front. And when I come back, he says, "Oh, you know what? They called me and I got this darshan." I don't know what to make of it. In terms of, I mean, like I said, it could be statistically irrelevant
I mean,
even, but
it is a
experiential.
real thing. My father is a very, very pious person. And almost any time he goes to a temple, something somehow it works out to where he has a very not the food collecting experience, your friend's experience of getting just a magnificent darshan. Um, even my wife and my mother-in-law, who I think for whom um, unconditional love comes very naturally, they will have numerous stories of circumstances where they felt stranded and they reached out to their Ishta Devata, who is Shirdi Sai Baba, and somehow things ended up working out with kind of very suspicious means. And I think Shirdi Sai Baba, at least my feeling is that he is a god of bhakti, and that I think most Shirdi Sai Baba followers will talk about the powerful role that bhakti has in their ongoing faith in miracles.
Yeah, it's
Um,
faith, right?
what
Shraddha and Saburi is what Sindhi Sai Baba says, and that is faith. Shraddha is
correct?
faith. Shraddha and Saburi. That is what that's what it is.
Obviously, it's hard for me to not over intellectualize any matter. So let's over intellectualize this as well. So, do you think that truly there is a third person God out there that is answering these prayers of the ultra pious? or the ultra believers? Or do you think that it is in some ways like a self-fulfilling prophecy that you are just more receptive to all of his actions as a prasadam? Which camp do you fall in? Is the miracle real, or is a miracle in the eyes of the beholder?
Somewhere in the middle, right? I don't believe that there is a miracle god that is sitting up in the skies and running all these computer programs to figure out who to give what to. I mean, it would be a huge document keeping exercise if he has to do that. But I believe in the power that is beyond what we can imagine, understand, and quantify. So there's a power. Now, is that power what we call the samashti, the power of all of us together, that is in some sort of a bank that gets used for people who need it and for people who actually deserve it at different times based on their karma. So if you bring the karma theory to it, the giving actually makes a lot of sense, right? You don't really have to believe in a God. It's your own actions that are coming to you as what you are getting now. But then you have to be humble and say, I have prasada buddhi. I take it as a God giving me so that I don't build up my ego as to how I have done it. That's a perfectly scientific, intellectualizable argument for me that I can live with any day.
So we're coming up on time. So can I wrap it up with one more, I think, comment? I think one beautiful shloka with tremendous meaning is the Kayana Vacha sloka, right? Kayana Vacha Manasendriyeva Vidyatmanava Pragate Swavat Karomi Yatyat Saklam Barasmai
Yes.
Narayanayati Samarpayami. And I think this is a great shlokam to end with, but also I think it's a great shlokam that dovetails with what you said exactly, right? In that, yes, there might be some sense of karma prarabdham, that's immediate acting that gives us the results. But unless we have the humility to understand that all the actions that we may do with our hands, all the actions we may do with our phrases, all the actions we do with our senses, all the actions we do with our intellect, with our mind, that they are all ultimately um, versions and manifestations of the higher power, then we will fail to see any miracle that even does exist and misascribe them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think offering everything. The end goal is if see the four purusharthas, right? Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Right? Dharma is the duties that you have to do. Artha is a means to do that you have to earn. Kama is all the desires that you have to fulfill. But once all these three are done, you have to get to moksha. Moksha cannot be happening with you holding on to anything. It has to be, everything has to be given away. Where do you give it to? Narayana iti samarpayami. You have to. There's no way that you keep it. Now, with cycle of time, and apparently it is said that all of us will get it at some point of time. It is just the acceleration that you are working towards. The otherwise you can go at a snail's pace and you will get, there is nobody who will not get realized, whatever time span it is. It's only the acceleration that you're looking at and your mental purification that you're looking at. So if you look at that, giving away, right, dropping your identification with what I have earned, I have gotten, I have collected, I have acquired, is the impediment towards going to the next level. And that, where else do you give it to? Narayana iti samarpayami. If you want to keep it, if you want somebody to hold on to your most dear things, you won't throw it on the street. You give it to God, right? He keeps it safe. So give all that you have to him. Tell him, keep my stuff safe. I'm giving it to you.
I think it's hard to end on a better note than that. So shall we
Yeah,
end with that then?
we will. We shall. Wonderful. It was
Hari Om
amazing.
Naranji, this is an amazing opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. We should do more of this.
Bye. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Hari Om.